and welcome to Porthole. I'm Steve Milne, and in today's programme we're taking you on a journey of discovery to a destination that's so good they named it twice. New York, New York. Now, whether you want to visit the Statue of Liberty, relax in Central Park, or shop till you drop around Manhattan, you can do it all in the city that never sleeps. And here to tell us more about what we can expect when we cruise into the Big Apple is Joanna Grove. Joanna, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
And I can imagine it's just a very popular city for cruise ships.
It is. It's a fantastic city. There are actually two ports in
Right.
New York. I didn't know if you know that. There's a Manhattan berth where lots of cruise ships come in for a day. It's within walking distance of Times Square.
Brilliant.
It's fantastic. There's also another berth round in the Brooklyn area. That's a taxi journey away from the very heart of everything.
It's not too far away, but it's a little bit of a journey, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd definitely say get a taxi. You don't want to waste any time in New York by doing a huge walk just to get there. Yes, so depending on what ship you go into New York on, it's worth bearing in mind that you might be docked in either of those locations.
Now, I believe some of the world's biggest ships go into New York as well, don't they?
Yes, I mean, there's so much to do in New York. They desperately want to cater for as many people as possible. Cruise ships are getting bigger and bigger every single year, and big destinations like New York need to know that they can cater for and be able to cope with all of these massive numbers of people.
I guess the good thing about having a lot of people coming in is the city is so big. There is so much to do. It doesn't really matter if there's a few thousand people that have just arrived, because
not at all.
It's like you just said, there is so much to do. I'm lucky enough to have been to New York a couple of times, and every time I've gone I've seen new things and I've discovered new places, and it's one of those cities that you really just want to go back to.
Absolutely. You can't do everything in a day, so it's worth having a little bit of an idea about what you might like to see, and then try and plan a route around that. Chances are you'll see loads of other things along the way, but yes, it can be really overwhelming if you get there and you haven't got an idea about what you might like to see.
What would you recommend as the best thing to do when you arrive and start in New York? Where would you begin?
Times Square.
Right.
Like I said, you can walk to Times Square from the Manhattan berth, and that's where you really feel the buzz and the atmosphere of New York. You've got the big sparkling billboards. It's somewhere you can just stand and look around you in awe and think, my goodness, this is what I see on the television.
It's where you see all the movies, all the films.
Absolutely.
It's exactly something that you always see on the television, and you can actually be there. Like New Year's Eve is apparently huge in Times Square, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, you have to fight through the crowds to get into Times Square on New Year's Eve, but there's everything can pretty much lead from there. So that's a great place to start. You can also pick up the open-top city sightseeing buses from the centre of Times Square.
Yes.
And I think if you're a newcomer to New York, that's a brilliant place to start, because a lot of people make the mistake of just getting on a tour bus in New York.
Yes.
Now, bearing in mind how tall most of the skyscrapers are in the city, if you're sitting on a bus with a roof, all you're seeing is the ground floor of everything.
Absolutely.
So an open-top city sightseeing bus is perfect, because you can actually take the opportunity to look up and see how huge this city really is.
I remember when I went there a while ago, I wanted to see so much, and I did that, the rooftop bus, and it was great because I could see so many different areas, and I got they talk to you as well, they give you information, which is brilliant. And then there were certain areas that I saw, and I thought I must go back to that one on my second or third day. So it gives you an overview of the whole city.
Absolutely.
And then you can work out where you want to get off, because you can get off if you want and get back on. Or of course you can go back to those places, because there's a lot of hidden gems in New York.
Oh, absolutely. And like you say, the best thing about that is the commentary. And in New York, I think they offer a commentary, an audio commentary in about 15 different languages. So wherever you come from, you still, as you're going down all of these little streets, as a first timer, you wouldn't necessarily know that, you know, if you just look to the right, you're going to see an enormous landmark. And you get some real fascinating facts from a tour like that.
New York's got something for everyone in regards to, you've got Soho, you've got Chinatown, you've got Manhattan, you know, all over the place. There's lots of different areas, and you know, you really could spend a lot of time in New York. So it's difficult to know, you know, how long you should go for. What would you recommend time-wise? If you could go there maybe before a cruise or after a cruise, how long do you think you need?
For me, I'd say about 3 or 4 days. 4 4 days gives you the chance to not do everything in a huge rush. I think if you can take your time and actually spend a little bit of time to soak up the atmosphere, grab a pizza, you know, stop and drink a coffee in one of the little coffee shops.
People watch. I love people watching. Just sit there with a coffee and just watch the world come around you, because some of them are very busy and running around. Then there are other tourists as well from all over the world, so you can really meet some crazy interesting people.
Yeah, and it's really easy just to get caught up in the modern rush of daily life, and you find yourself rushing down the street and almost running for a taxi, and you have to stop and say, wait a minute, I'm a tourist, I've got time to enjoy this. So I think a 4-day break before taking a lovely leisurely cruise, that's perfect.
There are a lot of sights to see. What should we start with? A Statue of Liberty, for example. I mean, we've seen that in all the films, which is brilliant.
Yes.
You can go to the island and see it now, can't you?
You can. You can go by ferry.
Yes.
You can actually, for a long time, the Statue of Liberty, the climb up to the Statue of Liberty was closed.
Yes.
As far as I know, it's now open. You can't climb up to the torch, but you can climb up into the crown. I've never been inside it. The climb is
I've done it.
Petrifying. Have you?
I've done it, yes. I went there in 2000 and I wanted to go to the top, and in my mind at the top, in the crown, I thought there was going to be shops and a bar and a restaurant. It's not. You can just fit 2 people.
Yeah.
So the climb took about an hour and a half because you move 1 step at a time. This is a long time ago. And then when you get to the top, you kind of take a quick look and a picture, and then you've got to get back down again. So you've got to weigh up whether you want to give that a go or not. But I mean, it is exciting to be in the crown, but as you just said,
you've got to go through the claustrophobic experience of going up and coming down at the same time. Yes, if you've got time to do it,
yes,
absolutely, just to tick it off your bucket list to say I've been inside it, then it's worth it. I've never been inside it, but I've been over to the island, and to walk around it is just as fabulous.
It is.
Although, don't you find it's so much smaller than you expect it to be?
Tiny, absolutely. I mean, it's the Statue of Liberty, and obviously it looks fantastic with the pictures and images, but it really is quite small in the grand scheme of things when you look at the skyscrapers across the water in New York, etc.
Yeah, but I think one of the best things about cruising into or out of New York is sailing past that.
Yes.
Especially if you're coming across the Atlantic from the UK, and suddenly after several days at sea, you come out on deck and there's this iconic image of the Statue of Liberty and this beautiful skyline. That's when you can throw yourself back into the days of all the immigrants coming over to America, and this is where they arrived. Fantastic experience.
Was it Ellis Island where the immigrants went through?
Ellis Island, yes.
And that's next door, is it? Not next door, but across.
Pretty much. It's sort of, it's another island, very, very close to the Liberty Island. A lot of the ferries, you can do a joint ticket, so you can go to both. But it's a fascinating museum nowadays. It's all laid out. It explains the process, that the immigration process. So when people would arrive in America, you can line up as people would line up. You can see the names of everybody who signed in the book when they arrived, and it's brilliant. If you get the chance to do it, it's definitely worth adding to your list.
What other kind of sites do you think you have to see? And there's a lot to do, but Statue of Liberty is brilliant. What other sites would you recommend people should go and see for themselves?
Wow, there's the Flatiron Building. That's the iconic kind of triangular shaped building that's huge and built on a tiny little patch of land like that. Central Park, where you can actually feel like you're not in the middle of one of the world's busiest cities. You can join a horse and carriage, you can go for a lovely tea.
And again, you feel like you're in a film, don't you?
Yes.
You walk around and you feel like, how many films have you seen filmed in the park there? It's amazing to think, wow, here I am walking through this amazing, iconic, green, fantastic area in the centre of one of the busiest and biggest cities. It's amazing.
It's beautiful. Along Central Park, you've got the Museum Mile, you've got the famous Guggenheim Museum. There's the Dakota Building, where John Lennon was famously shot outside of, and the Strawberry Fields Memorial there. The Empire State Building, of course, which you can go to the top of. But a little insider tip for you, I would personally, instead of that, recommend going up to the top of the Rockefeller Center instead.
Yes.
Because you get a fantastic view
of it, absolutely.
of the Empire State Building.
I know exactly. Someone else gave me that tip as well. The second time I went there, the first time I went up the top of it and it was fantastic, but I wanted to see it, and you're in it, so you can't see it. So when you're on the Rockefeller, you can actually take some pictures and get some great images. And you get that wonderful view down over the green expanse of Central Park too. So that's my top tip, the top of the rock.
that's where you get a fantastic picture of the Empire State Building, and you get a real sense of what New York is like from above.
And am I right in thinking that when you go to the top of the Rockefeller, it's educational when you go through as well, because they explain, don't they, kind of the building and the city, and you can see how it changed over the years, and it's until you get to the top, it's fantastically entertaining and educational as well.
It is, and a lot of people have probably seen the iconic black and white photograph with the workmen eating their packed lunches on the still bar about 200 stories up. That was taken as they were building the Rockefeller Center. So that's great to see, and when you get there, they've got a tourist attraction where you can sit on the big steel girder and have your picture taken, look like you're eating your lunch with them. So it's great.
New York is a great city, I think, to go to at any time of the year, but climate-wise, it can be quite different, can't it? Like summer can be really hot and winter can be really cold.
Really varied. It's similar to the UK actually, but in much higher extremes. If you go at Christmas, what an amazing atmosphere and experience, but expect 10 feet of snow. You know, you never know. If a cold front comes in, then they really get hit hard in New York.
Absolutely.
Again, in the summer, bearing in mind how much concrete and glass there is in New York, the streets at the bottom just soak up the heat. So
and it can be really warm as well.
Do your research.
So think about what kind of weather you want.
Yes.
Okay, well, do stay with us. We've got lots more to speak to you about, and you stay with us as well. We're going to be discovering more about what New York has to offer in just a few moments' time. Welcome back to Porthole, the program where we delve into the heart of the most popular cruise ports. And today we're getting a taste for the big apple that is New York. And Joanna Grove is still with me. We've both got really excited over New York, haven't we?
I know, it's a great city,
isn't it? It's a great city.
Yeah.
In the city in Manhattan, there's lots to do, but we wanted to talk to you about Harlem as well, because we've all heard about Harlem, but you've been there and you've done something amazing. Yeah.
Last time I was in New York, I wanted to go and have a look at Harlem, because a lot of us think, oh, it's going to be a really scary place, but what a fascinating experience that was. We literally drove through Harlem, and you know when you see on the movies these big brownstone buildings, this is where you can find them. And back in the day, it used to be quite a rundown area, but now they're some of the most expensive properties in the city. But you can actually go to the famous Cotton Club and listen to jazz musicians, and that's in Harlem. It's really safe to do nowadays as a tourist. Definitely a recommendation of mine. If you're there for an overnight stay on a cruise ship, or you're there for a couple of days, definitely get yourself over there and have a look. It's a big famous nightclub, a huge jazz location where jazz basically was born in New York.
And you won't get it like that anywhere else, right? New York is the place to do it. So this is where you're going to get real authentic feel for what happens.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
So we're talking about the activities you can do in New York, but what else can you do if you maybe docked and you want to have another experience that's not necessarily, you mentioned the armed forces, there's an amazing, there's a hangar that you can go to, is that right?
There is. Pier 86, it's right next to where a lot of cruise ships berth actually, is the Intrepid Air, Sea and Space Museum. It's a great experience. It's basically a museum about air, sea and space.
Fantastic.
There's a Concorde on the back of it. There's a space shuttle exhibition. Something worth bearing in mind actually, a little insider tip, is pretty much everywhere you go in New York, if you are forces or ex-forces, take an ID card with you, because you'll get everywhere for either free, you'll get discounts, you'll get half price entrance.
Fantastic.
So anybody who's ex-military, take something with you that proves that, and you'll be amazed at the concessions that you can get out there.
A lot of places that you want to go and check out, there are lots of queues, so I guess you might want to go sometimes early in the morning or try and space things out, because it can get really busy, can't it, in New York as well?
It can, and I think, I mean, to be honest, the big attractions, the big highlights.
You'll have to just give yourself some time, because there might be a little bit of a wait.
Absolutely. The World Trade Center Museum Memorial now, it's worth pre-booking a ticket for that. There are timed entrances to get into the memorial, so it's definitely worth doing. You know, looking in advance, doing your research, and booking up to get in there so that you know you've seen it. But you don't have to go inside the museum to really get a feel for the atmosphere around the old World Trade Center site. It's really quite fascinating. Just around the corner is the fire station, where the fire crew that was the first on the scene when the towers got struck there.
Wow.
That's now a memorial, and people come and put flowers outside. There are memorials to the firefighters that lost their lives.
Yes.
And the whole area there really is quite a cathartic atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And there's quite some moving stories as well, isn't there? You can hear all sorts. And I remember just walking around and looking in that area, and before we went through, I think I was speaking to a local and just talking, and they were telling us about where they were and what happened, and it was just so interesting to be in the city, and even to this day is something that people still talk about, and it's still really important. So I think if you want to see the memorials area, it's worth going to, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely. As I say, even if you don't go inside the museum, there are lovely fountains there, there are trees planted, the names of all the people who lost their lives are all inscribed there, and it's a very emotional place.
Absolutely.
But as you say, definitely worth seeing.
And it's been done really, really well. It's worth checking out just to see how it is. And I guess if we think about other activities you can do, you've got to check out Broadway, don't you? Because evening nightlife, I mean, I love a good show.
Me too.
I think I saw Rocky Horror in New York a long, long time ago. That was just fantastic.
Brilliant.
And all the big ones are there, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. You know, they say the lights are so much brighter there, and they actually are.
They are.
You know, you get swept up in this amazing atmosphere. There are twinkling lights. You really feel that, wow, this is where entertainment comes from.
Yeah.
If you haven't booked anything and you suddenly get there and think, I'd really like to see a show, there are ticket sales people everywhere. You can go into Times Square and there are people selling last minute tickets. Don't be afraid to go to these ticket booths and, you know, buy a last minute a last minute show seat. That they're perfectly safe to do so. They're not just touts that have set up on the corner. These are official booths, and why not? You're in the heart of, you know, the world's entertainment district. If you're there, see a show.
Go see a show. And also, if you want to do your shopping, let's be honest, you could spend 3 or 4 days shopping in New York, right?
You can spend some serious money
you can walk around. I mean, Macy's is one of them, and all of them. You walk around, and literally, before you know it, hours have gone by, and you're not even at the top. There's so many levels, it's huge.
Absolutely. I think a mistake a lot of Brits make, actually, is thinking that we'll go to New York and spend, you know, a lot of money on a lot of stuff that's cheap. That's not necessarily the case anymore. It's not that much cheaper in New York than it is in the UK, but for the experience of going and shopping in New York, it's definitely worth it. Especially,
like we said before, at Christmas time, it's just amazing, isn't it?
It's magical.
Yeah, it really is sensational.
Freezing but
cold.
Magical, yeah.
I think when I was in New York, I think the coldest I ever felt was in New York in December at one point, and the hottest I've been in August was in New York as well. I remember, I think we were in Brooklyn, and we did the bus, and they'd, one of those water fire hydrants, they just had those going with water, and the kids were underneath and that kind of thing, and it was just like a scene from a film, but it was just so hot.
Absolutely.
And it was just brilliant to be able to see what the locals were doing just to cool down.
Yeah, it does happen out there.
Happens.
You think that, you know, this is just something that they show on the movies, but no, it does get so hot out there. That's exactly what people do.
One thing you could do is literally just wander around, just have a walk around. I mean, you can walk and walk and walk. I mean, it's big, but not that big in the sense that you can find some great areas and some great restaurants. And actually, I guess eating in central, you know, tourist areas will be more expensive. So if you just kind of discover a few, you know, alleyways and here and there and local shops, you can get some really good, cheap food.
Definitely. I mean, it's the same with anywhere in the world. You try and eat somewhere in the very heart of the tourist areas. You're going to pay over the odds for anything, but take the time to wander off of that trodden tourist path and you'll find some amazing places to eat. The best steak I've ever had was in New York, and that was in a random little restaurant that we found by accident, and we thought, let's stop and have something to eat. And I think, you know, you're never going to be hungry in a city like that.
No, they do food well.
Every taste and budget can be catered for. Take the time to find somewhere that suits you rather than just stopping on a main street somewhere.
I'm sure it's the same in most cities in New York, but be careful if you order a starter. Sometimes they're as big as a main, aren't they? So I've done that mistake before. I think I ordered some nachos as a starter and then a steak, and the nachos were like, and I was just like, I'm going to eat all of this. So you've got to try and work out how hungry you are, because they do give you big portions.
It's the same with drinks. Never order a large drink because it comes in a bucket.
Literally, don't a huge one like this with a massive straw.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And tipping's important to understand as well. I know it's the same pretty much around the whole of America, but you do need to tip there as well, don't you?
Yes, I mean the service is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not law, but it is customary to leave about 15 to 20% on top of whatever your bill might be. That's the general rule, to make sure that you don't upset or offend anybody.
Yeah.
But you show your appreciation for the great service.
I mean, we're talking about people that come in on the cruise ships and obviously have some time to see some different areas, but it really is a city that you could go to before or after a cruise and spend, like you mentioned, 4 or 5 up to a week, for a few days, couldn't you? Absolutely.
I mean, it's really popular now for British cruisers to cruise across to New York, have a few days, and then just fly home. Just to say that they've been. It's a great city that offers something for absolutely everybody.
And it really is quite easy to get to from the UK. There's a lot of flights. Almost every provider flies into New York.
Absolutely. You can get there direct from most of the major airports. There are flights every day going to New York from the UK.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and if you don't like flying, then you can jump on a transatlantic crossing. Some of the ships can get you there in just a couple of days.
I know. There's so many ways of getting there. It just depends on how quickly you want to get there or what you want to do.
Absolutely.
So when you do get there as well, I know there's a good variation of accommodation, isn't there?
There is. It's not cheap in New York,
Yeah.
I have to be honest. It's not cheap, and I think you really have to shop around. So many people want to stay in New York. And it's
kind of an island almost, isn't it? You know, around the central part of it in Manhattan.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to stay on Manhattan itself, then you really have to shop around to get a lot for your money. But it's so popular. People will pay the money for it. Yeah.
Now, getting around is important too. That you want to see a lot, and we've talked about places all over the island and Brooklyn and Manhattan, etc. Hiring a car wouldn't be recommended. Is that right?
I wouldn't.
No.
It's not worth it, to be honest. The streets are gridlocked, and all gridlocked with yellow cabs. So jump in a yellow cab and do exactly what they do on the movies. Hail a cab, jump in, and let them take you. It's stress-free travelling around for you. Parking in New York is an absolute nightmare. So as a tourist, it's just not worth it. Take to the streets on foot. You can walk for miles in New York.
And you sleep well that night, don't you? Walking around New York, by the evening, you just think to yourself, oh my goodness, I need to have a sleep.
It's exhausting, absolutely. But yeah, there's subways. It's not worth hiring a car. Go with the public transport. There are so many public transport options available to you. They're quick, they're reasonably priced. Yes, it's not worth trying to do it on your own.
Absolutely, get some help and just get around with the cabs, and like everyone, even the New Yorkers do that, don't they? That's what everyone does.
Absolutely. Very few people have a car if they live in New York.
I mean, if you have come in on a cruise and you've only got a day or so, what would you recommend would be the one site or place you have to go to?
For me, I think Times Square.
Okay.
Purely because if you're docking in Manhattan, you can get there on foot, and everything, it's really central, everything leads from there. And that's where you get the real atmosphere and the realisation that, wow, I'm in one of the most amazing cities in the world.
I finally think that you're in New York when you look around and see the lights.
You see the billboards and you think, yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Joanna. It's been great to speak to you today.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much for watching. I will see you again very soon as we look through the porthole. Bye for now.